morning, boys and girls. Thank you for cooperating and helping to collect that offering. I just have a story to tell us that has something to do with what we're going to be talking about in our short sermonette. I probably should have invited Caleb up here. He can probably tell the story better than me. But there's going to be something in our scripture has something to do with the word endure, how Jesus endured the cross. And it made me think of a story of a real-life adventure that took place in the early 19th century. How many of you have heard of the name Ernest Shackelton? Very good. Many of you kind of know this story, and this was the age of exploration, trying to be the first to make it to the South Pole, and other explorations were being done in similar ways. And so he set out on this trip, and he found just the right ship for this, and the crew that was willing to do this kind of, I would think, kind of a crazy adventure. But we know how the story went. When they got to the place that they were going to set off on their trek, across the ice to the actual South Pole, the ship got stuck in ice, didn't it? And they were there trying to wait for it to thaw out, and it took a lot of patience doing that and thinking things would get better. But eventually it was clear that things weren't getting better, and eventually their ship, which was called the what? It's called the Endurance, wasn't it? I think it was aptly named. I can't remember if he named it that or if that was what it was to begin with, but eventually the ship was being crushed by the ice surrounding it. And so they had to do what they can to kind of salvage the supplies that could be used, and even they had some other smaller boats that they were able to keep and preserve. And eventually it was clear that they needed to mount a rescue attempt to go to, I think it was Elephant Island they were trying to get to. And so they actually bravely made it to this island, but it was clear that was not going to be sustainable for them to survive with the supplies running low. So I think Ernest Shackleton and some other select crew mounted this daring open sea voyage. And again, the Southern Ocean is pretty wild and tempestuous. But they made it, by God's grace, 800 miles to South Georgia Island. And that's where there was a whaling station, but they landed on the side of the island that the station was on. They had to, on foot, cross just the rugged terrain. It had never been done before, but by God's grace, they made it there to the whaling station. Now, in the meantime, his crew that he had left behind on Elephant Island, they were just waiting for their captain, their leader, to come back. And they were persevering and encouraging one another to realize that he had kept his promises all along. He showed selflessness all throughout, so he's going to come back and rescue us. And for Ernest Shackleton, his focus was on getting back to rescue those men. And he tried to commission different ships to come back, and finally he was able to get a ship that they made it back to Elephant Island. And not one of those men were lost. They were all saved during this adventure. So that's the amazing thing, is when we think about that ship called Endurance, it reminds me how Jesus endured. And it's in Hebrews 12, 1 and 2 talks about, and we'll talk about that more as the scripture reading is presented, but it says that Jesus endured the cross, despising the shame. And it was for the joy that was set before him. So just as Ernest Shackleton, his focus was on getting back and rescuing his men that he had a responsibility for. Jesus Christ, he didn't count the cross as something to be despised, the shame that came from that, and just the weight of the world. He endured because of his love for you and for me and for all those who would accept him. So let's remember that, and let's endure as he endured as well by his grace. So let me go back to your seats. Thank you for listening.